Okay, to begin the next step of the process, we can now begin getting our model ready for production. What does that mean? It means that we concepted out our mesh, our character, we're liking the proportions, we're liking the feel of him. However, he's still Dynamesh and he's still rather rough. You know, forms are defined and figured out, but nothing solid and 100% finished. And so what we're going to do, for example, if you notice in the creases of the nose, it's just relatively pretty low in terms of resolution. So we want to go ahead and add all that secondary detail, finalize our form, our tertiary form, and go from there. But to do so, we need to up our poly count, because currently it's 254,000. However, we want to get into the millions per mesh, and so to do that, we are going to move into subdivisions. And what subdivisions are, it's like if I tap Control D, right, it goes up in subdivisions. However, we want to do so with decent topology, because as of currently, Dynamesh gives us a wild tessellated mesh. And so what we're going to do is we're going to Zremesh our model and prep it for subdivisions. So what I mean by that, currently we have our head base. I think it's described enough that I do not need Dynamesh anymore, meaning that if I pull out my nose, I don't need to Dynamesh it to add more sculptable geometry. It means that I'm happy with my silhouette and my forms, and I'm not going to push it too much. That way I can go into subdivisions. To do so, what you need to do is feel free to duplicate your model. So we're going to have one on top, one on bottom. Go ahead and hide the one on top for now. Actually, let's go ahead and hide everything. So I'm going to shift click the eye to hide everything, and then tap the eye one more time so it's visible. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to go down to the one at the bottom, is go to geometry, Zremesher, and we're going to just Zremesh it. It doesn't have to be perfect. We don't need specific guidelines. Typically right now is when you can retopo it, get better topology, hand placed by yourself, and reproject the detail to that one. However, we're just going to do it relatively quickly, so we could just retopo one time. In the Zremesher settings, I'm going to turn off adapt. I'm going to go ahead and probably tap half, and everything else should be okay. I'm going to go ahead and tap Zremesh and let it do its work. So what you're going to see is the form's going to get blown out, the polygons are going to get bigger, and we should have a little bit of a cleaner topology flow, meaning it's not just scattered triangles all over the place. It's more or less quadded out geometry. So let's go ahead and let it do its thing, and boom. So if you notice, it's a lot cleaner, right? It has quadded geometry, and it's a little bit more easier to manipulate, meaning that if I subdivide it, right, it's cleaner, and I don't have to deal with Dynamesh anymore. And so what we can do, and technically we do not need to project the detail because we do not have too much detail on this Dynameshed head, but what we can do is project some of the details that might have been lost in that process from subdivisions. So to do so, what we're going to do is go ahead and make sure that you're on the head that we just Zremeshed, turn on the Dynamesh head above. Okay, so now the only thing I have visible is the Zremeshed head, my Dynamesh head. What I'm going to do now is go down to project in the subtool palette and tap project all. Boom. You can go ahead and tap no, that's fine. It's just saying that it wants to project the poly pane as well, but we don't necessarily need it. And boom, doesn't seem like anything happened. However, what it does is it basically transfers the detail from the Dynamesh head to our Zremeshed head, so that if I go up in subdivisions, Control D, go back to subtools and project all, now I'm projecting it to the second subdivision level. And we can continue doing this until we feel necessary, or we feel like we got enough detail transferred over from the Dynameshed head. But since we didn't have too much detail finalized in the Dynameshed head, we didn't even necessarily need to transfer that said detail. But if you notice, this was subdivision 2 without projecting it. If I move forward in time, which this bar allows me to do, this is basically my history bar. If I'm currently right here and I move forward in time, you'll notice that it transfers over the subtle details from that Dynameshed head. And that's kind of what we're trying to do. We're trying to make sure that that detail that we added doesn't get lost and go from there. And so with our detail now transferred to the Zremeshed head, we can go ahead and delete our Dynameshed head, rename this head, and now we can move on.